Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to talk about how the supermajority rules work in Congress. This is important for understanding the instances where having a simple majority does not always apply to every legislation that gets introduced in Congress, and we need to see when a supermajority is needed to get legislation through Congress. When the framers were thinking about what rules Congress should operate under, they agreed it would be best to let the House and Senate each figure out their rules. Otherwise, the Constitution would be unbearably long and clogged. Currently, the Senate has 44 standing rules covering subjects such as the order in which to read memorials about deceased citizens, circumstances when the Sergeant at Arms can compel the attendance of absent senators, and ethical violations. The House has 29 standing rules, such as establishing committees to study bills, setting procedures for electing officers, determining the days of the week certain issues will be considered, and limiting each member's speech to 5 members at a time, therefore prohibiting filibusters. In case you do not know what filibusters are, they are referred to as extended debates. In 1957, Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, in protest of the Civil Rights Act, filibustered for 24 hours and 18 minutes. In addition to passing or blocking a bill, the Senate has other important jobs like approaching the president's nominees for federal judges. Senators can filibuster just about anything they choose. Now, filibusters can be broken with Rule 22, which invokes closure. That is when 3/5 of the members agree to end a debate. Before 1975, it was a requirement of 2/3. Now it is 3/3, but it is a big problem because it is difficult to reach. Filibusters disrupt the Senate's ability to do its other work. Rule 22 attempted to resolve this obstacle, but it rarely succeeded. As a result, the fate of a bill can boil down to whether to end debate, not on whether a majority agrees with its content. Think about it. If 60 of the 100 senators, a supermajority, agree to end the discussion, the bill comes up for a vote. If 41 of the 100 senators refuse to end discussion, a filibuster, the bill never comes up for a vote. Just a threat of a filibuster can prevent a bill from coming up for a vote. And with the two major political parties increasingly at odds, it has become nearly impossible to persuade 3/5 of the Senate to agree on anything controversial. An example of this occurred during President Barack Obama's administration when Republicans refused to take action on his nominees to the Supreme Court and to lower courts. In 2013, Democrats who were in the majority voted to change the Senate rules. They said, quote, "We will end the filibuster for all presidential nominees and save Supreme Court justices," unquote. But 4 years later, the Republicans were in charge. They said, quote, "Now Democrats won't allow President Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee to be voted on. Fine, we'll wipe the section of Rule 22 regarding that court off the books," unquote. The action was so dramatic, it was called the nuclear option. The filibuster remains controversial. Some people think it helps prevent tyranny of the majority, while others think the majority should rule no matter what. But remember, a filibuster provision is not in the Constitution, and the framers did not think about that since they left both chambers to decide the rules for themselves. So any back and forth with the rules on the filibuster will depend on which politicians are in charge of the Senate. Let's look at other legislative systems. 24 states require a supermajority vote in their legislature to take action, but only on specific items, generally related to budgets or taxes. In Texas, the Senate used to require that 2/3 of its members must agree to bring up a bill for a vote. Otherwise, it would be shelved. This gives clout to the minority party, who might not want to share power. In 2015, they eliminated that requirement. For filibusters at the state level, they are rare. In most state legislatures, the party in power can end debate. Some states require an absolute majority, a majority of the entire membership, to end debate. Others accept a majority of only those legislators who are present and voting. In other countries, a supermajority is required by only a handful of nations to support certain actions. For instance, legislators in India and Japan cannot amend their constitutions without agreements from at least 2/3 of their members. As for filibusters, some countries allow members to delay votes, but not to block them entirely in Japan. In Great Britain, the Parliament allows members to speak for a maximum of 4 hours. Keep in mind that US senators can still filibuster bills, but by majority vote, they could delete this final bit of Rule 22. It was the same way they eliminated the filibuster for judgeships. Then, ordinary legislation could be passed by a majority of the Senate rather than needing a supermajority. Alternatively, the Constitution could be amended. This would allow the supermajority requirement to stand only regarding areas where the government might want more than half of the elected officials to agree before they take effect. Still, this filibuster issue opens the door for politicians in the minority to abuse this method as a way to slow down or completely stop legislation from going through that can hinder our country from making legislative progress. It is like saying something with less votes won. Let's look at an example of a filibuster affecting legislation for immigration. In the fall of 2010, in Chicago, Illinois, Lazia Dahala found that she had been selected for the Dallas Morning News summer internship program. She was a journalism major at Northwestern University. She and her parents immigrated to the United States from Canada when she was 6 years old. But Dahala was not an American citizen. To receive the salary that the internship was offering, she needed a work permit. She applied for one, but it never arrived. The editor rescinded the job offer. Losing the job, though, turned out to be the least of her problems. She got a letter from the Department of Homeland Security telling her she was supposed to appear in immigration court. That is the first step of getting deported. Now, let's go back to 2001. Congress first introduced the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors DREAM Act. This bill offered young undocumented residents who had entered the U.S. before the age of 16 a way to eventually become citizens, as long as they passed a background check, paid a fine, and remained in good standing for more than a decade. Polls show that most Americans supported the legislation, but opponents believe the bill would give amnesty to criminals. On December 9, 2010, the DREAM Act passed the House with 216 votes in favor of it and 198 votes against it. Following a week of debate, 55 senators, more than half, voted for the bill. The majority in Congress had supported the DREAM Act. Yet, on December 18th, it failed to pass. How could a bill that had the solid support of the majority of both chambers die? Well, it goes back to the filibuster. The Senate's vote on the act was not really on the bill itself. Under the Senate rules, the group first had to vote on whether to end their debate and then vote on the bill. A majority wanted to, but not a supermajority, which Senate rules required. So the DREAM Act did not get voted on because a procedural rule blocked a vote, which negatively affected Dahala's hopes of working in America without fear of deportation. But does that mean nothing was done for the immigrants? No. Something was done to help the immigrants, but not from Congress. It was from President Obama. In 2012, he issued an executive order. He said, quote, "Deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA, will allow certain undocumented immigrants who enter the U.S. as minors to apply every 2 years to postpone deportation and receive a work permit," unquote. One of the requirements is that applicants must have arrived in the U.S. before the program was announced on June 15th. That was Dahala's graduation day. She said, quote, "Thanks to DACA, I've been able to work legally and my focus has turned to immigration reform," unquote. In 2017, President Trump threatened to end DACA, though Congress did not take action. A year later, a federal court ruled that Trump cannot end DACA. In 2020, the Supreme Court blocked the Trump administration's attempt to terminate DACA. Now, this example shows another way the president can try to legislate by issuing executive orders on certain things. Presidents can issue executive orders at any time, but for this example, Obama did this when Congress could not send an immigration bill to his desk for his signature. In general, we have to be cautious about letting executive orders replace congressional actions because it can defeat the purpose of having a legislative body create bills for the country. So, as we see again, another barrier, the filibuster, that is not even formally written in the Constitution, can hinder legislative progress. This can be traced back to the framers letting Congress have their own internal rules instead of being clear with what Congress can not do to stop bills from being blocked. When a procedural rule does not get written in the Constitution or is too vague, we open the door for bad actors to make up their own rules to stop important bills that can help the country from getting voted on by the rest of the senators. Again, when we let our current government structures unfairly give more power to a small set of people instead of balancing it out for everyone, it makes it difficult to productively legislate. In conclusion, the use of a supermajority rules and filibusters in Congress shows just how complicated our legislative process can be. The framers wanted each chamber to set its own rules to keep the government flexible, but over time, that flexibility has created new barriers to passing laws. The filibuster, usually used by senators in the minority, has been used to delay or completely block legislation that has majority support. As we saw with the DREAM Act, even when most lawmakers agree on a bill, it can still fail because of procedural rules that require more than a simple majority. While requiring supermajorities can be important for major decisions like constitutional amendments, they can also slow progress down. This raises some important questions. Should the filibuster continue to exist if they prevent Congress from acting on issues that most Americans support? How can we make sure progress does not de-window when a small segment of our politicians have objections? Where should a simple majority and supermajority apply to specific legislative things? These are important questions to think about as we continue to assess our constitutional structures to see how else they can present limitations to how our government operates. In the next video, we will proceed into talking about citizen participation in our country, starting with gerrymandering. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on the post notifications so you will be notified when I post my next video. I appreciate your support. Remember, you are powerful, you are capable, and you are the changemaker our society needs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you soon.